All right, so after the fall of the Tang, if you check your dates, you'll see that there's a 50-year period between the Tang and the Sung. And during this period, there is basically a smaller kind of era of kind of civil war, a struggle for power within China. And the dynasty that picks up the pieces after the Tang collapse is known as the Sung. Now, as you can see here from the map, the Sung um, are much less powerful and expansive than the Tang were. During this 50-year period, again, China's traditional rival, their traditional enemies, the northern nomads, begin crossing into northern China. They begin conquering parts of northern China and again, setting up their own kind of nomadic kingdoms in those areas. Um, so the Sung are, essentially left with the agricultural areas. Their focus is on southern China, which is why they oftentimes get the name Southern Sung. But in terms of culture and in terms of their political aspects, the Sung are going to be a return to the days of the Han. They're going to bring back that traditional focus on Chinese people, Chinese culture, Confucian ideals, and all that. So, like we said, the Sung are weaker militarily. They are unable to secure the northern borders of China. The nomadic tribes move in, they establish kingdoms, the Jin and the Xia. Um, so the Sung are forced to consolidate their rule in southern China. And because of this, they focus on that traditional Chinese land and culture. Um, Now, the population within China continues to grow, the economy continues to grow, trade continues to expand. But during this time period, the focus of that trade moves further south. It moves away from the Silk Road, which traditionally runs into northern China, which is now under the control of the Jin and the Xia. And instead, it begins to focus on the Indian Ocean trade. So, southern ports, places like Macau, like Guangzhou, like Hong Kong, these southern port cities begin to double and even triple in size. And we're going to see when we come back to China again after the Mongols how the majority of their focus is now on the Indian Ocean trade, and the Silk Road starts to become less important in China's economy. Now, the Song, being traditionalists, turn even further away from Buddhism, and they begin to reject foreign influence in China. They begin to essentially close ranks. Confucius and his teachings once again become the established model for how government and how society should be run. Um, so, along with it, there is a resurgence in education. The Soon build hundreds of bureaucratic schools and colleges around China. The exam system comes back into the forefront, but so do the negative aspects of Confucianism. The highly stratified social classes return, patriarchy returns in a big way. This is the era where foot binding is introduced into Chinese culture. And, part of this is patriarchal in terms of it's a method of control and oppression of women where they're forced to try to live by these incredibly painful and deforming standards of beauty, but it's also cultural in a way. The Sung use foot binding to show the difference between their women and these, uncultured, uncivilized, barbarian women in northern China under the control of these, nomadic empires. Now, culturally, this is a pretty expansive period for the Sung because, again, they reestablish the traditional Chinese way of culture, but they also begin to push Chinese technological innovation out into the rest of Asia. Thanks to their connections with the Indian Ocean, Chinese technology begins to make its way into the rest of Eurasia at a incredible rate. The magnetic compass comes out of China during this time period. The post rudder enters the Indian Ocean during this time period. Paper currency makes its way into the Indian Ocean during this time period. Printing technology, which is going to be massively important going forward, makes its way west during this time, partially through the Indian Ocean, partially through the Silk Road. But by far the most life earth changing invention to come out of China is gunpowder. And gunpowder is developed before the Sung, but the Sung dynasty is the first one to really integrate it fully into their military. The creation of rockets, the creation of bombs, the creation of early gunpowder weapons like the fire lance, the nest of bees. These types of weapons begin to diffuse out of China under the Song dynasty. Now, culturally, with the reassertion of Confucianism and those teachings, Buddhism takes an even further hit within China. It is rejected by the government. It is widely rejected by the population, who start to see it as being a barbarian influence on their traditional Chinese culture. Because again, Buddhism is not natively Chinese. It comes from India. It's passed along to them through Central Asia. So people in China, a large portion of the population, begin to see Buddhism as an unwanted outside barbarian influence on their people and on their culture. Um, so the persecution of Buddhism within China actually serves its growth elsewhere around Asia. Buddhist monks flee persecution in China and make their way into other parts of East Asia. Japan, Korea, Vietnam all see a surge in Buddhism under the Sung dynasty because many Buddhist monks are forced out of China. Um, Politically, like we said, the Sung continue a lot of the established practices of the Tong, while kind of focusing their philosophy and their methods on earlier Confucian methods. They revive the ministries and the departments that were established under the Tong. They continue the Confucian exam system. They continue the tribute system. However, under this iteration of the tribute system, the Chinese are negotiating from a much less powerful position. So it's not on nearly as beneficial terms. They're negotiating more as equals rather than superiors with their neighbors. Um, Now, the Sung dynasty lasts for about 300 years, and they're an important factor in the continuing economic and cultural growth of China and China's cultural expansion throughout Asia. But politically, the Sung are a disaster. They are unable to secure the northern border. This allows an expansion of the lands and the wealth of these northern nomadic neighbors, and the Sungs' consolidation and their focus on cultural growth and economic growth means that for the most part they neglect reestablishing control over the North. And this is going to come back to bite them in the end because their absence, the absence of a strong Chinese state in northern China, allows for one particular nomadic group, the Mongols under Genghis Khan, to grow very powerful. And Khan begins this conquest of pretty much all of Asia, which culminates with his grandson Kublai Khan conquering the Sung in 1279. And this is going to establish a Mongol run dynasty known as the Yuan dynasty. And this basically disrupts Chinese control over their country for the next 100 or so years after 1279.